We're about to get started. Whenever you're ready, have them come down.
Thanks for coming. Welcome. This is our second event, and it's still in beta test. We're still trying things out. So still trying to tweak it. So any feedback, either here or by email or whatever, we're pretty accessible. So let us know. Whether it's eventually we hope to grow it, to market it a little more. Not disseminating the event too widely right now, but if you have people that others that want to come, please invite them on Facebook. We have 3 people speaking today, Justin, Chris, and Steve. We'll do a couple things in the middle. I think Chris first.
All right, thanks, Gavin. So today, I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the non-aggression principle. So this is called At the Center, the non-aggression principle. And to be forthright, I borrowed some of the content from a few thinkers that I found online. One whose name is Stefan Molyneux, and then also from some Freedom Air Radio and Think Twice production content. So once the Earth was thought to be the center of the universe, and this was called the geocentric model. So geo, of course, meaning Earth, and centric meaning center. So the geocentric model for a long time dominated thought, where people, again, thought that the Earth was at the center and that heavenly bodies traveled around the Earth or sort of floated above the Earth. However, as observations improved, weird complications began to sort of mess up this model. So a lot of thinkers at the time, the intellectuals at the time, insisted that this model was correct, and then as their observations improved, their tools improved, telescopes were developed, they looked at the heavenly bodies, and they continued to see them travel, but they started to see sort of weird phenomena occurring, and they needed to find ways to explain what it was happening that they observed. So again, it makes sense if you really think about it. You're standing thousands of years ago on Earth, and it appears to be flat, and you're looking at the sun crossing across the sky, and you say, hey, the sun is moving around the Earth. However, a few brave thinkers started to look at the existing models and to think that maybe this wasn't exactly the right model for what exactly was occurring. These thinkers, what they would do is, again, they'd see the sun, but then they'd see some of the other heavenly bodies, and they didn't appear to travel the same way the sun did. Some of the other heavenly bodies would seem to travel, they'd sort of come back the other way and then continue on, and they had to think of different ways to explain what it is that they were seeing. So again, thinkers like Galileo came along and said, hey, let's try a different model. Let's put the sun at the center of the solar system, and how will that explain what we're observing? And of course, this is the heliocentric model. Helio means sun, and centric at the center. And the heliocentric model, once it was developed, relatively quickly, it took hold. And the reason it took hold is because in its simplicity, it explained away all of the complications that these various thinkers were observing. So once a new model is developed, sort of the old models can fall to the wayside. And we've observed this in other times throughout history as well. Einstein with E equals mc squared helped to explain the relationship between energy and mass through the speed of light being a constant. And once his theory came along, all the other more complicated theories fell by the wayside. Similarly, with natural selection being the primary driver of evolution, when Darwin came along and explained how natural selection occurs, all the other models, and we're still seeing this occurring today, but all the other models started to fall by the wayside. So you have, whether it's religious models or other more complex models, of how where the origin of life is, those sort of models start to fall by the wayside. You might be wondering why I'm telling you all this. Well, I'm proposing that a similar phenomenon is occurring in society. And that is that our society is becoming unnecessarily complex because, like the complexities that came with putting the Earth at the center of the universe, we have, willingly or not, put the state at the center of civilization. It has become a virtue to worship the state and rely entirely on higher and higher levels of government, using its monopoly for it to provide for our every need. So I propose that we need something else at the center of our civilization. Not the state, but something else. We need a new model that will lead to the end of our existing models. And that central tenet that I propose is what I think all human morality should be based on. That is the non-aggression principle. We learn it as children. We learn to not hit, to not push, to not steal, to not threaten, because these things tend to make our problems worse. However, as we get older, if we have the courage to see it, we begin to realize that this is not how society works. There's lots of threats that occur. There's lots of force that happens. There's lots of stealing that happens. Legalized force. If you don't hand over the fruits of your labor, people dressed in uniforms will show up at your door and they'll take it from you. And if you continue to refuse to hand over the fruits of your labor, they will lock you up. And if you refuse to be locked up, they will shoot you. This is a violation of the non-aggression principle. And you can see many, many different examples of this. When two consenting adults want to engage in trade freely, if you don't abide by the virtually infinite number of rules, again, people will show up at your door and they'll try to throw you in jail. If you don't want to go to jail, they will shoot you. If you don't want to be a part of the mandatory retirement plan that is Social Security, the same thing will happen. They'll throw you in jail. If you break any of these rules, they'll throw you in jail. If you don't want to send money to a foreign dictator, someone will show up at your door. You're not paying your taxes, and they'll throw you in jail. If you don't want to fund foreign wars, the exact same thing will happen, and on and on and on. And all these are violations of the non-aggression principle, things that we are taught as a child. In the same breath, the teachers that taught you this thing when you're in elementary school, if you went to public schools, your teachers would teach you these things. You hit your neighbor, and they say that's not okay. If you steal from your neighbor, they would say that that's not okay. But of course, hypocrisy is that the fruits of your labor can be stolen to pay for their salary. The status system has become laughable and complicated, and quite frankly, delusional. When we recognize that the increasing complexities that we observe start to reveal the errors in these systems, you'll realize that this is an example of that occurring, that the non-aggression principles need to be placed at the center of our virtues and as our society as a whole. Like the sun itself needs to be fixed at the center of everything that we do. So think about a society without organized violence, without the threat of state correction, without institutionalized kidnapping. I think this is something that we can realize. And like the thinkers before, whether it was Einstein or Galileo or Darwin, these people were paradigm shifting. And we need people like that. And these people already exist. I think we're part of this community, and we're trying to build this community, but these ideas are paradigm shifting. In order to break down the existing model, you have to develop a new model. You have to get the word about the new model out. So I think that's what we're doing here today. And that's where we're headed. We're trying to help to sort of light the fire that will help to get these ideas out there. And our new model, with the non-aggression principle at the center of it, will help to show the errors in the old model. So I hope you all join me in rethinking the way that our society is built and help to put different values at the center, the non-aggression principle being one of them. Thank you. So I'm going to invite Gavin back up now I think we're doing petitions now.
Yep. We started this last week. We wanted to have something kind of analogous to what happens in a lot of churches where people will present something that they want people to know. It might be agreements they have, something that they want. It might be, in a lot of churches, they're just offering an intro to people they have visiting. I mean, it could be any number of things. One of the comments last time was that we had several people offer an experience, and one of the comments was that it was very focused on negative things. And it was, and there's probably, this is my, what I'm offering is not my thoughts on that, but it's probably something, it's something to think about. You do want to let people know positive things. But there is a reason that we tend to focus on the negative. I think it's, when something bad happens, if it happens to me, I would want people spreading it. I would want people to know. I mean, that's all you have. I mean, the people that are helpless. And, you know, I see, I've gotten criticism because a lot of the stuff I put on Facebook or something is, you know, a dog being killed by the police or something like that. And I tend to only put negative things, but if that was me, you know, that's all I have is for people to let other people know. Maybe that's not all I have, but it's important. So that's just my thoughts on that. But it's still a valid criticism. I mean, we do want to let people know positive things, and we don't want it this to be a venue only for negative things. Anyway, does anybody have something to offer? Or that
I can add something. So yeah, just last night, I was spending some time with a guy who works with me. He's from the Ivory Coast originally, and just really great guy. And you know, he was saying, and he's been working for me for a couple of years now, and he's seen me build my business, you know. And he was just saying, like, you know, wow, like, you know, I really want to stay in the U.S. because, I mean, I've lived in France, I've lived in Ivory Coast, and there's just no way, like, you could have done what you did in these other countries. So, despite the restrictions, I mean, you know, it's also important to be thankful for what we do have. I mean, it should be no problems in the U.S. now. So, you also have to be thankful, you know, for the freedoms that we have here and the progress that's been made. That, you know.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's I think that's often a criticism too, where when you point out the negative, it's usually pointed out that, well, it's worse other places.
But it
is good
doesn't
to
mean
know
it can't be better.
Yeah.
But I mean, you should see it as progress, as a
In
possibility.
relative terms.
Exactly.
Right.
And also as giving hope. You know.
Right. Good, thanks. Anybody else? Not as many people here as last time.
I can all offer something. You know, it doesn't have anything to do specifically with me, but it's kind of one of my pet issues, which is, you know, it's what's worth mentioning is the drug war. It's, you know, we have more prisoners in this country than they had in the depth of Stalinist Russia and the gulags. And the prison industrial system, you know, they take these kids who are, a lot of times, don't have a lot of, they don't have a good upbringing, or they haven't had a lot of privileges, and they put them in, and they basically become lifetime criminals for doing it with a nonviolent activity. And the prisons a lot of these prisons are private, so they make a profit off it. Sometimes the prisons have explicit contracts with the states that guarantee that they're going to have a certain number of inmates as a contractual agreement. So the whole system, and the cops love the drug wars because it gives them the right to invade privacy. They can come in your house, they can walk a dog around your car and indicate to it to pretend there's something, that smells something, and it just gives them license to do so much. So, you know, we also know that illegal drugs the U.S. government has been involved the CIA has been involved in drug trades with Mexico because it's a way to get black operations funds off the books. So all these things are, it's just, you know, right now, there's millions of people in prison for non-violent, non-crime, and it's not acceptable. So, I mean, it's a negative thing, but, you know, it's still, like Gavin said, if I was one of those kids, I'm in prison right now for doing what? It's like, I would like people to be bringing that up, so anyway, that's just.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the jailers and the legislators are often just as guilty, just haven't been caught up in it.
Yeah, I mean, George Bush did cocaine, Obama has smoked marijuana, admittedly. How can you say this is such a destructive thing? I mean, you don't have to do it. Like,
It's moving slowly in the right direction.
what's up?
I mean, there's progress being made.
Well, on marijuana.
Yeah, marijuana, it goes so somewhere. But just make cocaine legal, so.
But even the idea that they can regulate it, you know.
But you don't think that drugs in any, there's no I understand what you're saying about non-aggressive inmates, incarceration, but you don't think that there's any negative associated with the usage of drugs?
Sure. But there's negatives associated with drinking. There's negatives associated with not working hard. There's negative. I mean, it's you know, if someone's not doing anything to you, they're not. The negative that they inflict upon their own life is their business. I mean, it's up to them to come up with, you know, maybe if they want advice, they'll come to you and say, should I be doing this? But putting them in prison is not going to.
But you do admit that.
Oh, sure. I don't do drugs. I mean, I would never do cocaine. I don't think it's a good idea. But
by making it legal, it gets pushed on the ground, and there's negative social consequences, and the black market and organized criminal activity that grows up around that, that's far worse than what happens to the individual, and maybe something else.
I think most of us have a motivation to help people.
Yeah. I mean, you already have a case study, right? There was prohibition in the United States, right? Drinking alcohol was illegal, totally underground. Became legal. It's not equivalent because it has different impacts. Alcohol has a different impact than, say, heroin and some of these other stronger drugs. You have a case study of what happens. You know, they become legal organizations, manufacturers of alcohol. Bars become a big thing. And you sort of self-regulate how much you consume, but on average, the consumption increases, right? So we have that data. So let's say, you know, hypothetically tomorrow all drug laws were repealed. We know exactly what happened.
There was actually a study done in the Netherlands where marijuana is largely legal, and that the actual marijuana use of that population is lower than much of the rest of Europe. So that data point is actually in the opposite direction. I don't think you necessarily know what would happen, and I think it might depend drug to drug. But I think getting caught up in that sort of empiricism can get you in trouble. Because what we're advocating for is a peaceful, prosperous society where people can engage with one another and trade freely. And when you get institutions of force involved, where someone can take two people who are engaged in free exchange, and then maybe someone can do harm to themselves and take a drug that's do horrible things to themselves. As long as they're not harming other people, you then throw them in jail, and then you might make them part of the criminals.
If they harm other people.
Well, what I'm saying is that someone
it's A+ stamp of approval too, but that they are, you know, not necessarily hurting anyone but themselves if they're hurting anyone. And in that sense, for the state to enter into that equation and say, well, not only is this wrong, but I'm going to severely punish you and I'm going to remove you from society. You know, how to split those hairs is a tough task, but the fact that in general moral reasons enter our laws sometimes in ways that maybe they don't need to. I don't think the morality should never enter into law, but I think sometimes it does too much. And you have to be careful to look at what minority faction is speaking through something. And what voice is being heard, and why do they hold the reins of power? That's my ramble on that.
I think there are voluntary mechanisms to, I could just look back, I could offer one story when I was younger. A friend and I were sitting at a bar, as we frequently did, and there was another guy there who was pretty wasted. And at some point during the night, he got up and walked across the room, figured he was going to the bathroom, but he walked out the door. And my friend ran out to see where he went, and as he got to the window, the guy was getting into the car and driving off. He came in and he said that to the bartender, and the bartender freaked out. She called the police. I mean, who knows? I don't know what happened from there, but the point is, people don't want other people to get hurt. People don't want other people to abuse themselves. You know, a voluntary society would be much different. You wouldn't be driving on a road with no restrictions on a public road. But that just shows that people have a personal interest in not seeing other people get hurt or hurt themselves.
I mean, the thing is, like, so heroin's legal, how many of you guys really go out and do heroin like that? But if someone that you know is doing heroin, that probably means that something's really bad in their life right now. And then on top of that, they're a criminal, they don't want to tell anybody because maybe you call the police on them. So then what are they going to do when obviously they need help? And they don't need to be thrown in maximum security prison and get like sexually assaulted. You know, I don't think that's going to help them in their life. And that's like the key issue. Is it a criminal or is it a cry for help? They just cry for help, but then they can't talk to anybody about it. I mean, that's the issue I see. You know, people need help.
And
Like you said, people want to help you, but then you make them criminal, and then
you go further then.
who knows? I mean, one temporary thing becomes like a permanent thing in their life, and they ruin their life because of one bad event when they need support, but they were pushed away because they know it's illegal. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and in a free society, you have nowhere to go but to your neighbors. I mean,
And also,
there's nowhere else to turn, and there's strings attached when other people really don't.
like I said, I mean, that's, it might also be these drugs are not actually as bad as they made out to be. I mean, they have an incentive to make them seem worse than they are. I know when I read the history of the building of the railroad, the transcontinental railroad, they said that the Chinese were the best workers. They would smoke opium all day Sunday, but then they would be great workers. Whereas the Irish were horrible because they would be drinking wine all the time. They would smoke opium.
And that's not to suggest.
The moral of the story is that the Irish need to smoke more opium.
Well, I mean, that's my point. I mean, in other words, like, you know, you can be a functional, and you can be a but like, look, if you drink alcohol, you're altering your, mental state. Like, I don't know that, that people can't do these kind of things responsibly to a certain extent. But I mean, it's just who makes that decision. And the other thing is, if you don't have the state involved, people are going to be more engaged in each other's business to a certain extent, because it's not just like the politicians take care of it. It's like people say, well, you want to buy cocaine at CVS? Well, no, because CVS management is going to make a decision about not selling it. It's not the government, but they're just going to say, we are concerned about this. So they're engaged in not just passing.
Those cocaine type of stories.
Yeah.
Also, the potency of drugs as they are now is higher than it would be for the consumer preference because of prohibition, right? It's more profitable for the producers of the drugs to make them more potent, so they can charge a higher price for volume, for the shipping, stuff like that. So it wouldn't be nearly as potent probably if it were legalized for most of these drugs. Maybe there would be a level of responsible use, or at least not as dangerous.
All right, well, we should probably move on.
All right. So if you're here last time, we talked about Henry David Thoreau and civil disobedience. And I had mentioned that he was influenced by a play about civil disobedience called The Mask of Anarchy. And it was written by Percy Bysshe Shelley, who was the husband of Mary Shelley. So today what I'd like to do is discuss the story of Frankenstein and propose my thesis, which is that the story of Frankenstein is actually an allegory of the state. And I'll also give some historical context of the Shelleys and the people surrounding them, as they were radical political thinkers of their time. And this gives some circumstantial evidence of how political they were in their writings and their views. So Percy Shelley's father, his name is Timothy Shelley. I have slides, by the way. We wanted to put this on the TV because I'm introducing 4 people here, and it would be easier to put a face to a name and everything. So what I'll do is I'll share the slides on the Facebook page for this, so you guys can look through it, and it might be easier to visualize it, right? So like I said, this is beta. We're messing with technology. It didn't work out. So work with us here. All right, so Percy's father, his name is Timothy Shelley. He was an aristocrat, a politician. He was a liberal Whig. He was liberal on most things. But unfortunately, he supported the Corn Laws, which were protectionist measures to raise the price of grains in England. And it caused a lot of poverty and really hurt the poorest in society. So this became a problem. The first Corn Laws were put in place around like 1817 or 1819 after the Napoleonic Wars. And so the combination of the country being ravaged by wars and the Corn Laws really hurt the poor people. And this led to a massacre where there was a violent protest. And it was called the Peterloo Massacre. Well, I'll talk about that in a second. Because actually the Peterloo Massacre was the motivation for the Mask of Anarchy. So anyways, Timothy Shelley, he was an aristocratic heir. His father married into wealth. He married like a bunch of rich wives, and then they'd pass away, and he just, I guess, snowballed his wealth by marrying into wealth. So Timothy Shelley had a very rocky relationship with his son, though.